Good afternoon, good morning for those of you joining us from the West. Good evening for those of you coming to us from the South. Thank you very much for making time to be with us today. This is the third webinar in a TaRL Africa webinar series that we launched a few months ago. And the topic for today's webinar is utilizing assessment data to drive action for foundational learning. As the topic suggests, today's session will explore the role of assessment data for education planning, policy, and practice in Sub-Saharan Africa. And we are very excited to be joined by a great set of panelists today. I will be introducing them as we go along. But I just want to share that I think it's going to be a very engaging session with a diverse set of views and experiences. And I'm glad you were able to join us today for this session. Just some housekeeping. Today's session will be in English. Everyone will be speaking in English. Our presentations will be in English. So if you have challenges with that, we do apologize, but do leave us feedback later if you would prefer to have access to the resources in other languages, and we will see what we can do. We will be recording the webinar. So we will be able to share the recording with all of you and others who have registered but unable to attend today at the end of the webinar. Before we get started, I want everyone to familiarize themselves with the Q&A box. You should all be able to see a Q&A option in your menu. It should be at the bottom of your screen if you've joined from a laptop, or it should be hanging somewhere on the top if you're on your mobile phone. It says Q&A. Please use only the Q&A box to submit your questions for the panelists. We will not be able to take questions from the chat. I will continue to monitor the chat. And if I see that you have put the question in the chat by mistake, I will request you to please add it to the Q&A box so that all the panelists are able to monitor your questions and ensure they get answered. So once again, please do locate the Q&A box, familiarize yourselves, and make sure you add your questions there. It's lovely to see some of the introductions coming in the chat. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'd love to see who's joining us, where you're joining us from, any reflections you have to share. Of course, you'll have the opportunity to share reflections with us later as well. We can already see we have representatives from Tanzania, from the US, from Sierra Leone, Cameroon, Morocco, and more. So fantastic. Really excited that you are all able to be with us today. From Madagascar, fantastic. Very nice to meet all of you. Somaliland, Malawi, Kenya, excellent. So without further ado, I think we can go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, we have a stellar lineup of speakers today. And I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Cleo Dintiliac from the Gates Foundation. Cleo, who many of you may already know, is a senior programs officer at the Gates Foundation's Global Education Program, focusing on Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, especially on foundational skills. So Cleo really brings the excellent background that we need to get us started today. She's been focusing on investments on data quality, large-scale interventions, and more. So we're very, very lucky to have Cleo with us today. Thank you so much, Cleo, for making time. And we're going to hand over to Cleo to hear her perspective from a global point of view, from Sub-Saharan African point of view on the assessment landscape and the use of assessments. So thank you very much, Cleo. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Devyani, and very excited to participate to this session and to learn from all of you here. I'm gonna share my screen to present. And essentially, I'll go through a few slides in 10 minutes, about 10 minutes, and then we'll open up to questions and then we'll go to other presenters. So I was asked today to speak about 3 topics briefly. The first one was to give a high-level overview of the assessment landscape in Sub-Saharan Africa. The second was to maybe connect this with an update to the global conversations that are being had, especially around the SDGs. And finally, there was one simple yet very difficult question around the one key thing to encourage governments and NGOs to keep in mind as they design assessments. So let's get going. On the general landscape of assessments, I think all of you would be familiar with it, but essentially this is a brief taxonomy borrowed from Clark 2012, which lists the different types of assessments out there. So there are obviously national assessments that are about providing feedback to the system. And LARS, for instance, in Rwanda is an example of that. There are cross-national assessments that, many countries, so there was someone from Madagascar on the chat, participate to, which are more complex assessments psychometrically, but enable comparability across countries. There are classroom-based tests that are mostly about providing feedback on teaching. There are examinations that were historically about a selection purpose, but today possibly play more of a certification one. And finally, there are also household evaluation, some of which are administered by the PAL network, also by UNICEF Mix, and which try essentially to provide a snapshot of all children in a country. And it's typically not done by the Ministry of Education. On top of these, there are obviously program evaluation. So for instance, TaRL uses as part of their work very regular evaluations to allocate and graduate students. There are also more general program evaluations. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with all of this, but then the key question becomes what's missing? And there are probably 2 types of issues around assessments. The first one is to make sure that the assessments you have in your system measure the right thing. And this can seem counterintuitive because, in theory, we all know that we want assessments that are valid and reliable, representative of a sample, comparable over time to track progress, and maybe in some cases also comparable across countries. But the issue is that many assessments don't always meet these criteria. So they don't always measure, for instance, if you take early grade reading, the specific sub-skills that lead to reading with meaning, because that's something that is actually quite intensive to measure. They're not always comparable over time. For instance, if you take examinations, they're not necessarily designed to be. And they're not always comparable across countries. And that's mostly also because different countries' national assessment typically test different skills at different grade. And so it's difficult to learn or to benchmark across country just because difficulty levels are not the same. I think the other typical type of issue is more about not the assessment itself, but about the assessment strategy. So it's important, depending on your country, to assess at the right juncture. And, assessments in the early grades is often essential because it enables to diagnose issues early, but it's not always done as part of national systems. And the other, maybe even more important issues is that more than having this or that assessment, the most important thing is to have a coherent assessment strategy. So you have examples sometimes of countries, and I won't mention the name, but that may have, a mix and a PASEC assessment. But if the 2 types of results don't speak to each other and or are not analyzed, it's not always very useful to have many assessments, especially because in the early grades, sometimes the administration takes a lot of effort, and it's probably more important to use the data well as opposed to have many different types. So these are some thoughts, and I'd love to have the feedback of the group because you all are assessment experts and will have useful feedback on this overview. But let me shift now to also the global perspective. So if we speak about comparable data, in particular comparable data across country, maybe let me also give a sense of what the spirit here is. So the idea is not to have the same assessment everywhere, but rather to define a common standards and thresholds to be able to compare relatively different types of assessments. So to take a nutrition analogy, eating an apple is good, eating a banana is good, but at the end of the day, they're both fruits and they bring both a lot of the same nutrients. So the spirit is that it's okay that some people take a banana, some take an apple. The most important thing is that you take 5 fruits a day or X fruits a day. So it's the same analogy. We recognize that different assessments will be different, but the most important thing is that they measure the key sub-skills that are important for children to learn. So if you look at the current way that comparability is defined by UNESCO Institute of Statistics, you will see that a number of countries have data, but that a lot of other countries that are in red in these two graphs do not have 2 or 3 SDG measurement points recently. And SDG measurement points means learning at the beginning of primary or at the end of primary or at the end of lower secondary. So why is it important to be able to compare across countries? I mean, briefly, it's for 4 reasons that, may matter differently to different people. The first one is that, results that are comparable across country may become very politically salient and in turn influence what is taught. It's also important for advocacy, that's the second line. It's important for accountability to some extent. And finally, for research, because today you cannot do comparative research on the reforms that work better or worse, because you don't have common outcomes across countries. So on this global comparability issue, the main issues are around the early grades. Some of you may have heard about the downgrading of indicator 4.11a. It's mostly related to the fact that it has low coverage. And the efforts that are being done today are the following. A number of things have already been achieved. So the fact that there is an indicator, it has also been work done to define common competencies that all the assessments that report should meet. And finally, there has also been systematic reviews, at least of the cross-national evaluations against these common competencies, that common framework. What remains to be done, though, is to have clearer guidelines, in particular on the conditions for inclusion of national assessments. And this is particularly true for the beginning of primary assessments, just because there's a lot of diversity in the way these skills are getting measured. Some are one-on-one administration, some are average receptive tasks, and they don't always measure the same competencies or have the same benchmark. This is a brief update on the criteria that were released by UIS recently on this. I'd be happy to speak more to it if useful, or to refer you to the UIS documents. And maybe to close, if I had to say, what's the one key thing to encourage governments and NGOs to keep in mind? I would probably, say the one is really hard, but maybe there are 3 in order of importance. The first is that it's important to have valid and reliable assessments that are comparable over time, just to track progress at the country level. And this point on comparability over time is actually more tricky than it seems. It's also essential that to have a coherent strategy at the national level on how different assessments fit together, what's their purpose, in order to optimize resources. And finally, probably the third priority compared to these other 2, but possibly still important, is to have comparability across countries where relevant, because it also links to a rigorous international standards. thanks a lot for the time. I'm very much looking forward to learning from you all in these exchanges. And over to you, Dev.
Thank you so much, Cleo. That was really insightful, and I'm sure everyone's thinking about everything you've shared and thinking about assessments in their own context. I have a question just out of curiosity. Do you have at the top of your mind any examples from countries that you have interacted with that are have made significant progress on using assessments, especially for foundational learning, even if it's not for action, at least having data that's relevant at the national level? Are there any such examples that you'd like to share with the audience? Um, and we have another question around comparability, which I'll come to, and then the others you can pick up in the Q&A box.
Sounds great, thanks. Yes, I think two examples come to mind. The first is India, actually, and just because they launched a foundational learning survey in 24 languages, which is it relates to also all of the complexity that doing a national survey in a place like India reveals and entails. And so it's called the Foundational Learning Survey, and it's really a state-of-the-art type of assessment. It's comparable over time. It assesses all the skills that are rigorously related to reading with comprehension. And they do this, and in parallel, they do NAS, actually, end of primary and later secondary. So that's, in complement to ASER and some of the household citizen-led surveys that happen there, strikes me as a very coherent, set of assessments. Maybe the other one would be South Africa, who launched recently this Funda Mpumelele survey, again in national languages, African national languages, and the type of work that they've done to establish benchmarks on this is pretty admirable. There's another question, but I should...
Yeah, there are lots of questions, and I'll leave you to answer those in writing. But one of the questions I wanted to thank you for those examples, Cleo, and I'm sure people will be able to dive into them now to learn more about what's happening in India and South Africa. But a question we have from Alex Gloria in the Q&A box is: are there specific assessments you would recommend that would help achieve comparability across countries?
Thanks. So I think it really depends of what you're trying to achieve as part of this broader strategy. And it depends what you already have. So I wouldn't have a blanket statement for all countries, but I think the things I would look for are indeed that it's valid and reliable, and that the sampling is done well, and that it measures something that is not being measured elsewhere. For 4.11b, you have options like ample, but that are only available in some languages. For 4.11a, you have also many options, but yeah, happy to take that in the chat in the case of specific countries, as I don't want to give too many blanket recommendations that would probably not work so well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Leo, in the past years, we've seen that there seems to be now increasing alignment on the importance of foundational skills. Now we're moving towards alignment on how to define those foundational skills. And I think we still have some way to go on how to align on measuring those skills, but we should not wait for that alignment, right? I mean, what's most appropriate in every context should be used now itself. So thank you very much for that, Cleo. That was great. And I think the audience has a lot of food for thought from what you shared today. There are many questions in the Q&A box. So if I could please request you to use the next few minutes to answer some of those typed so that our audience can hear from you. Reminder to everyone again, please do add your question in the Q&A box, else it will not get answered. So if you've added it in the chat, please copy paste it into the Q&A box. But thank you once again to Cleo. I think Cleo is still around. So if you have more questions, please do put them in the Q&A box. And of course, if we have time after we hear from some of our other presenters, we'll come back for a chat. But thank you so much for kicking us off with those very thoughtful remarks, Cleo. We're going to now move to the next presentation on our webinar today, which is from our very own Anjali Shandilia of TaRL Africa and Pratham International. Anjali works very closely with the Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria teams and other aspects of measurement, monitoring, and evaluation at TaRL Africa. And it comes from the Pratham International family. And she's also been working with various partners and some of our learning innovations at TaRL Africa. So welcome, Anjali. Anjali is going to give us an overview of TaRL Africa's work in assessments and some lessons that we have learned. So now we're moving gradually into the practical side of things after the opening remarks from Cleo. And just for those of you who joined us late, before I hand over to Anjali, my name is Devyani. I'm the technical advisor at TaRL Africa, and I'm the director of programs and partnerships at Pratham International. So very happy to have you all with us today. Remember to add your questions only to the Q&A box and not the chat. Otherwise, we won't be able to answer them. So thank you once again, and over to you, Anjali.
Thank you so much, Devyani, for the introduction. And Cleo, to get us started, let me quickly share my screen. Perfect. So as Devyani already introduced, we are going to talk about the assessments in TaRL, and I will give an overview and learnings from the same. Let us get into the overview section, but before that, let us revisit the learning crisis that we all are aware of. Look at the learning levels of grade 5 across countries in the table on the right of your screen. Only almost 30% of grade 5 children are able to read a simple paragraph in Nigeria and Côte d'Ivoire. Our experience suggests that parents, teachers, and policymakers overestimate what children can do. And we tend to see the issue that lies with out-of-the-school children, but not the problem of children who are in the school and not learning. Secondly, we can also see that the overall reading levels are low, and the tail of this distribution is long and varied, causing a huge heterogeneity at the classroom level. Math is often worse. So the question is, who and what should the teachers focus on while teaching? Lastly, unless family members understand this problem, that is, children's inability for reading basic text, etc., it is difficult for them to help, and several existing assessments were not helping to understand the basic problem of poor foundational skills. Then the question arrives, how can assessments help in this? And the answer lies in identifying a balanced tool covering the key competencies and still be quick and easy to understand. By keeping the key focus as to inform the teaching and learning, not just capturing the children's performance. With that, I would get into the first section of my presentation, which is about the overview of TaRL's assessments. And let's get into it. By keeping this whole idea of balancing in our mind as a foundation while thinking of any assessment in TaRL, we broke down the what. We understood that we need to assess children on the FLN skills, group them and teach them as per their level, and then consistently track them over a period of time. And this is to provide the targeted instruction and the support to the children, and systemize this as a plan for the next round of implementation as well. And therefore, assessment needs to be simple, straightforward, easy to administer and to understand if we really want people to act on it. And to be able to incorporate all these factors, understanding ground realities is crucial, because they influence the purpose and the design of ASER assessment tools and methods. The ASER tool right now is being used in 17 plus countries in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, and recognized globally as an innovative approach to assessment for understanding the FLN issues. It's been contextualized in more than 30 plus languages within Africa. Here are a few example tools. The first one on your left of your screen is in Hausa, which is used in Nigeria, and the second in Kiswahili, which is used in Kenya. Now, what are the tasks that makes the ASER assessment an ASER assessment? Let's deep dive into how the reading assessment tool looks like. First, It does include recognizing letter or symbols. It includes reading common everyday word to the children. Third is about simple paragraph, which is more comparable to the grade level text of that country. Fourth, about having a story text or a short story about which is more comparable to the grade level text, grade 2 level text. Within that story, there are comprehension questions, both factual and indirect fact retrieval. Whenever the TaRL is implemented, these tasks are contextualized to ensure that the text is familiar to the child. We do it by first involving people who understand the language and the education context. Second, conducting language analysis for grade 1 and 2 level text and reviewing each item for each competency. Third, by piloting the tool, and in the end, we finalize the tool. We see the numeracy tool with similar understanding. This is our sample numeracy tool. It covers 1-digit number identification, 2-digit number identification, 2x2 subtraction question with borrowing aspect, and lastly, 2x1 division question with non-zero remainder. However, the question lies, what after contextualization? Our experience says that it needs more to make ASAR assessments to be integrated in the TaRL programs. And now in this section, I'm going to talk about how have we tried to do the same? And I will share some of our key learnings. Our topmost learning is that one should understand and work within the government structures and follow their processes, people, and the system that was already created by the government. It helps us to integrate the process better and to have a greater buy-in for sustainability toward the assessments, data use, and overall program. Therefore, people are involved at each level in data collection and data use. For example, in Zambia, the data flow up, it includes different people from different cadre to help us getting the data to reach to the national level. Teacher conducting the assessment at the classroom level, which is the first stage, and collating that assessments at the classroom level, followed by the aggregation by the head teacher at the school level. At the zone level, the government stakeholder, in Zambia, it's zonal in-service coordinators, also known as ZICs, aggregates the data and pass it to the district level stakeholder, that is district resource center coordinators, to digitize the data, which further goes to the provincial level, to the provincial resource center coordinator, also known as PRCCs, to collate the data from all the districts and then lastly reach to the national level. However, there were challenges, right? With the delays in the data, the consolidation, accuracy, inconsistency. Therefore, to work better and leverage the contextual knowledge about the digital aspects, along with government, we moved from the Excel aggregation to the online data entry portal at the district level. And there, when we introduced the data entry portal and bring us to our second most important learning, that we need to support the system in making the process simplify and make the data usage easier. And one of our support is through the creation of this data entry portal to speed up the data collection process by making it more readily available and with the easier data management. The portal provides backend support to enter the data at the school level, provides a user's end summary for the school level data that can be disaggregated as zone, district, and all the other level. This is to make sure that there's more time spent on utilizing the data as opposed to collecting. It definitely has improved our total turnaround time and elevated the data accuracy. However, with this simplifying the process, it takes time. Table on your left shows that in the first year of data entry to the portal, only 57% of schools enter the data within 4 weeks in Zambia. However, as you see the lower end in 2022 and 2023, it changed in Zambia. Almost 97% of schools submitted the data within the first 4 weeks. And these changes take different time across the context. For example, in Zambia, the data collection is more decentralized because of the better internet and smartphone availability. However, in Nigeria, it changes, it differs. Because of low internet and smartphone penetration, the data turnaround is still an issue. In Nigeria, we have an extra level of collating the data, which increases the total turnaround time. And in addition to the support systems, there is also a requirement of the constant efforts to be made to build that capacity, to be able to reach to the faster turnaround time and to have the capacity to support the data systems. And with that, I would cover, and for these very reasons, I would cover the third learning that we have, the system level support, there is also a need of consistent capacity building. And we have been doing it through the different training sessions, creating resources to build that capacity. For example, during our training, we conduct sessions on entry, usage, and build dummy data entry platforms to be able to help the participants to learn and practice it more. These efforts also address the mindset issues of apprehension towards handling numerical data, encouraging participants to confidently use data for decision-making and actions. Internally, we have been trying different ways through our internal learnings to identify and document these best practices to increase the trust in data as well as the turnaround time. With that, I would like to summarize my presentation with 4 key takeaway messages for us. First, understanding the context can lead to the good assessment design, and that's the basic of any assessment. Second, it's crucial to work with government structures to achieve greater buy-in regarding the importance of assessments. Third, we need to be consistently collaborate with the government to strengthen and simplify the systems because one size doesn't fit all. Lastly, progress takes time, and we have to be patient with that. It requires consistent capacity building and review to be able to make sure that the assessment are integrated and used carefully in the system. With that, I would like to thank you, everyone, and I'll pass it to Divyani, and I'll take any questions that are in the Q&A box.
Great. Thank you so much, Anjali. I know people are probably just digesting your presentations. I'm still waiting for questions, but I have a question for you. From your experience on implementing the data portal, what's, according to you, the top challenge and the top benefit of doing this at large scale with the government system?
Thanks, Adani. So definitely, it has been getting integrated into the system now. So for example, one of the best thing that we have identified is that the data is on the portal. If you would see, there will be a clear visualizations of different data pieces. So whenever there is a requirement of seeing how the children are doing, what's the learning outcomes are looking like, we don't have to wait till the level of analysis. The people from different cadre, they just like log in and check the data. It's faster for them as they have to make more conversations and to be able to use for their visits at the classroom level. However, in terms of challenge, definitely the internet penetration across the country, across the continent in Africa, it's been one of the challenge areas. We are identifying in Côte d'Ivoire, let's say, the data cost very high. And to be able to make everybody to use it on a regular basis, it requires some efforts to push people on that. It's also more decentralized. That's what I was talking about in my presentation. To be having this more decentralized structure, we need more smartphone penetration, internet availability at different levels, so that people can utilize it at the right time. So these are the 2 learnings that I have found out from the internal learning that we did, but I'll be happy to take your more questions on that.
Great. Thanks so much, Anjali. And we have another question in the chat. First, I'd just like to, I think Chimunya Mulea asks if the programs, including the assessments, are being implemented in Zambia. Yes, they are. Government leads the catch-up program, which is a TaRL inspired program in Zambia, and the data portal, etc., is all active there. So happy to chat with you more on that, Chimunya, if you'd like. There's a question from Alex, which I think we can take verbally. So how did you get the government to use the data? Is it integrated in the MS, or is it managed separately in the different contexts in which you have worked?
Yeah. Thanks, Alex, for the question. Very interesting one. So it differs. It differs for all the countries that we are working in. So for example, to begin with, recently in one of our core countries in Côte d'Ivoire, we are actually doing that. The data entry system is going to be embedded within the government portal, and they are going to utilize it through the system. However, from our side, we have been doing consistent capacity building and data users sessions with them, with all the countries, Zambia, Côte d'Ivoire, and Nigeria, where we hold training sessions to talk about data usage, how can the teachers be using the data, how can mentors be using the data, how the discussion should happen like at the national level to understand the data. So these are some of the discussions that we do. In addition to that, I also highlighted the inclusion of different videos and the resources that we have made to be able to push that understanding of utilizing the data. So some of our videos talk about how these data points support the teachers to build their session plans, how these data points can help mentors to decide which school to visit at what time. So these are the kind of data usage pieces we have been pushing for through different efforts that we have created within the organization.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Anjali. And I think I'd just like to add to that there's still a lot more to do and to learn and to progress on. So, Alex, this is something that we can continue to check in on as we learn more and we make some more progress on supporting governments to use data well. So thank you so much for that, Anjali. I know it was a lot for our audience to take in, but hopefully people will be able to clarify some more through the questions. Remember to keep putting your questions in the Q&A box. Anjali and Chavi will answer some of those questions in writing, so keep them coming. I'm going to move us along now. So thank you so much, Anjali, for that presentation. I'd like to move us now to our next speaker for today. And I think here is really where we get into the true implementation now. We're joined today by Mr. Sanford Kalito, who is the Education Officer for Teacher Education for Eastern Province in Zambia. Welcome, Mr. Kalito. As I was mentioning just a few moments ago, Zambia has been one of the first countries in Sub-Saharan Africa to really embrace and grow a Teaching at the Right Level program. I won't even call it a Teaching at the Right Level program. This is the Zambian Ministry of Education's program called Catch Up. And we have had the honor of working together with the ministry for many years now to support the scaling of this initiative, which is now on its way to going to national scale. So thank you very much, Mr. Kalito, for joining us today. Eastern Province was one of the first provinces to start the program, I think back in 2016. So it'll be great to hear your reflections on how you've been using data, how it's been helpful, etc. So thank you very much for making time. I'll hand over to you now. You can unmute and I'll request my colleague to share the screen for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Tavin. And this is Sanford Kalito from Eastern Province of Zambia, one of the provinces that initially started the program. And for Zambia now, we're scaling up from 2018. That was in 2016. And thereafter in 2018, scaling up started. And now we are almost hitting 9 provinces. And it's mainly Copper Belt province that is remaining. And just to have a brief background of the same is the reasons for the program and understanding where we're coming from is wanted to address the low literacy levels and numerous levels that are in our schools. And this was also to help the learning outcomes on the foundation skills in numeracy and literacy or mathematics. Of course, not forgetting that the program sought to enhance the teaching methods that our teachers are providing in school. So this was really what we have been doing. And to run through this presentation, we'll look at the roles of different officers in assessment process. After that, we'll look at the assessment verification, then the data flow at different levels and the usage of the data. So on the practical aspect, as a province, indeed as Ministry of Education in Zambia, information is viewed at different levels. And the first one is at district level. We have, starting with at school level, as it was said, school level, there is information gathered by the teacher. And from the school, it goes to the zone. From the zone, it goes to the district. And from the district, it goes to the province. So we are seeing at district educational, teacher education standards and planning are involved in gathering and looking at this information. At zonal level, we have what we refer to as zonal head teachers and the zonal inset coordinators. These are the ones at a group of schools which are zonal, looking at that data. and the assessment process. And at school level, of course, we have the teacher, head teacher, we have the mentor, and we have the catch-up teachers that are responsible for this information that we're looking at. So all these are involved. And we see a scale up from the school level to the national level. This is how the information is distributed. It's not just information that remains at one place, but the assessment process moves from the school level up to the national level. So the first point is to check the fidelity of assessment data from each level and quality assurance. That's from the hard copy to the online copy. So this is very important in the assessment process, that there must be a check of what is really happening at every level. And indeed, to ensure an update catch-up record management from the school level, you start looking at the process by monitoring the catch-up records that are compiling up to the national level. There is also a support in the analysis of data at the lower level, and this offers the trainings in different capacities. When you look at the assessment process, you are able to link to certain things that are not happening so well. So that data analyzed at the lowest level can help us offer trainings, and we have been offering trainings at different levels because of the data at that level. And the fourth point under the roles that we are doing in the assessment process is actually to analyze the data and prepare summary reports for review meetings. Now, after the process has been done at every level, from school level, the zone level, the district level, the provincial level, and national level, we see a review meetings that at the end of the day, the decision making is done to abate whatever problems we have. So we see every level making decisions from the reports that are being highlighted at that level. And then this review, to review the reports from the lower level to ensure data understanding and the use of providing ongoing support. Teachers need to be supported through and through, and it's through this process that we see where support needs to be done. So these reports are sent to the district, to province, to headquarters, and indeed our partners that have been helping us in the process. So this is our role in the assessment process. Very, very critical that without any of these, then the whole process doesn't move so well. So we are coordinated from the lowest level up to the highest level and see the benefit of this assessment. We move on to verification. Yes, so after all the processes have been done, we also have the assessment verification. And who does this verification? So earlier on, we talked about the mentor. The mentor at school level are able to verify the ZICs, these zonal inset coordinators at the zonal level. A group of schools do verify this assessment. Then the District Education Board office at district level, they are able to verify the data by using the planning officer or the standards officers. And at provincial level, we also have the standards officers for mathematics and languages, and indeed the education officer and all standard officers that are there, and indeed our cooperating partners of VVOB and other ZOCs. These are able to come in and do verification as to whether the process was handled correctly. So in the process of verification, at least when you go to, at least you have 3 schools by the district and 2 schools by the ZIC. So these go out after the process has been done. They move out to these schools so that they do a reassessment and check whether the process was really done correctly. So this is how the verification by those officers is done. And what are we looking at that level? We are looking at the checking of the assessment data in terms of quality. Was it really, does it need all the things that we want when we are talking about assessment? So we are going to look at the assessment procedure, whether it was done correctly, and look at the entries on the hard copies of the assessment. So we see the different elements involved. What happens at school level is actually the reassessing of 3 learners. You are going to pick at random 3 learners in each grade of those that have been assessed. For example, in grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5, each grade, you pick at random 3 learners and have them for your reassessment so that you verify what you are seeing on paper. So we are going to record those results and compare with what the teacher initially recorded. You can have some disparities, but we don't expect that there are bigger disparities under that process. So that's how the actual verification of the assessment is done. And after that, the process gives us an insight of the assessment procedure, whether it is done correctly or not. At that level, you are able to tell and advise the teachers. So how can we also involve, apart from that, the last bullet is we also involve our planners at the district level. We have a district planning officer in charge of the data system at district level, and the standards officers. These planners are at district, provincial, and national level, as well as the standards officers are at all those various levels. These are key to the assessment verification, because what they do at this process is basically to check what has been happening, and they are key also in tracking and reporting at district level, at provincial education officers level, and at headquarters level. So those give us the backing when we are doing a verification process. So this is how the verification in summary is done when we are verifying. Now, to do the data flow before the portal, we start from the bottom here. Each school is given 1 to 5 days basically to run around the assessment, and this is done on a one-on-one by the teachers. So learning levels for each child are assessed at that level. So a school will carry out that process, and that's how the assessment will be done the first 5 days. The next days, the school will still have to consolidate, meaning that the senior teacher comes in, who is the mentor, and just looking at the information and consolidate at school level. So that will be very important at school level to see how the teachers and the senior teacher overseeing what is happening at classroom level as they are doing the assessment is done at that level. From there, the data is now moved to the zone, where the zone aggregates in form of summary according to the number of schools that a particular zone has. So you may have 6 schools in that. So the given 5 days later is to make a consolidation of the schools that are in the zone and provide data by the zonal inset coordinator, who is the ZIC, who is consolidating at that level. And that is also pushed. The zone-wise aggregated data is also viewed at district level. And this is where we talked about standards officers as well as the planners that have access and can do that view. From there, days later, it moves to the district, moves to the province, meaning that the province, teacher education and specialized services, and the planning units are able to again do a view of this data, look at this data, and that's how the data moves on to the nation level and they consolidated at that level. Of course, the consolidation is done at zonal level, but all these partners are able, in the Ministry of Education, they're responsible officers that are able to follow through what is happening. So all those days are located that the time frame of flow of the data is done and followed nicely by the partners within the Ministry of Education that are following this point. So that's how the portal, before the portal, the data is done. So benefits of data portal is that we are talking about real-time tracking. You know, every moment how much data is entered, and the remaining data is with the ZIC, making a follow-up which is very easy. So real-time tracking simply means we are there and we are able to follow what that is happening at the lowest level. So it becomes very easy for us to follow what is happening at the lowest level. Then it also gives us the second chance for real-time analysis. No need to wait for data entry to be completed and separated. But now at this level, you are able to see the analysis of what you have done. It gives you a clear picture of what is happening at that level. Then it's easy to understand when you look at exactly what is happening at that level. When the school has submitted to the ZIC, you are able to see the exact interpretation of what is happening at school level. So that is even before you have to upload, but you are able to see what is happening at the paper, on the paper that you are using. At the data entry, finally, the data entry portal allows for special checks, no duplication, extra or missing scores. So this one, the better quality of data is basically how you are going to finally the end product of how the data. So basically this is benefits of data portal is we are saying before the information, before the data goes to the main portal, the school is able to see what is happening at that level. So you're able to analyze the performance of your learners, the learning outcomes, and you're able to see where you need more effort at that level. So that becomes very important. The information assessment data in the Ministry of Education, I think, has been very key, as earlier alluded to, that I think the reasons for going into this was that he wanted to address the low literacy and numeracy levels, as well as to improve the learning outcomes in these areas, especially on foundation skills that has been neglected. We see that assessment, as the earlier presentation was, in different forms, but comes at a later stage. Now we are neglecting the foundation skills that the learners, we can't really see and know what the learners have at that level. So this gives us a very good idea to understand what is happening at the lower levels of our grades. So to guide the implementation, the assessment data in the Ministry of Education has been very important, because this is what is guiding us to allocate teachers. Mostly teachers are allocated to grades that already know how to read, and neglecting those that are lower. For example, grade 1, 2, 3 in the Zambian context, and 4, we have teachers that are possibly not all that conversant with the methodology. So this is a guide. When you look at the results, when you look at the analysis results, we'll be able to see how best you can allocate the teachers. Our assessment data also gives us a holistic overview of the performance of the school. That's very, very important. What we see is actually the performance of the teacher in the learners. This assessment is very realistic, and you are able to see what the teacher is inputting at that level. So all those competencies that have not been helped by the teacher to go into the learners, an overview of the school performance is seen at that level. So you're able to see the overview at school level, at zone level, at district level, and how they are helping each level to move upwards or downwards. So that's very important as we look at ministry point of view. Then we also have an activity selection. This assessment is also good because it gives us a picture of what we should teach our learners. Remember, we are talking about learning outcomes at foundational level, foundation skills that are not in the learners. For example, in the learners, if phonemic awareness or phonics or reading, what is it that the learners are not doing very well? So this assessment will help us understand the selection of activities that we can help with the learners when we want to track them. And indeed, we also have an aspect of tracking learner progress. When you do the initial assessment, which is the baseline assessment, you are following through the learner and checking how the learner is progressing. And the learner cannot be stagnant for the whole year, then there is a problem. This assessment to the Ministry of Education and at every level also helps us to understand how the learner is progressing. So that gives us a very good aspect of checking how our learners are progressing. This also in the Ministry of Education, the assessment is very good. it helps us to set the targets for midline and endline. And we are able to develop an action plan. In terms of decision making, our targets have to help the learners. And in terms of our targets, we are driving from the learning outcomes. What is it that we want our learners to achieve? So using that, we are able to formulate an action plan that is target oriented and see how best we can achieve our targets. And lastly, the assessment is used to plan targeted support. Of course, mentoring and monitoring, very, very key. We have seen mentoring aspects to be very key in this assessment procedure. And we want to mentor the teachers that are actually handling these learners. So we are mentoring them by different partners. And monitoring is also done by different standard officers at district, province, and HQ. And of course, not forgetting our cooperating partners, VVOB, have been very instrumental in helping in monitoring what is happening at zonal level and school level. So this is how the assessment has been very, very important to the Ministry of Education. Some of the challenges that, of course, you find through when we have been conducting this is actually assessment not conducted on time. Yeah, we geographically, Zambia, and each province has different challenges. And because of what is there, we have an aspect of not conducting assessment on time in different areas. I think that's a challenge that has been noticed time and again. And the biggest challenge in conducting our assessment during assessments is actually absenteeism, which is quite high. And this, because possibly it's done in the first 2 weeks and learners have not been coming to school more often. So that becomes, I think this is biggest challenge. You can derive it from the data at national level, at provincial level, you see some disparities from the baseline to the midline. You see numbers dropping, others going high, but not the absenteeism rate is quite high. So I think that's one of the challenges that is there. And the last one is basically the inaccurate data recording, because the data is moved from school level to the first consolidation is done at school level, where the mentor, who is the senior teacher, must check. Sometimes at that level, the inaccuracy of data recording begins. And as it moves to the zone where the consolidation is done, again, there is some inaccuracy. Sometimes zone insert coordinator has ended up swapping some of the results, but later on discovered because of the monitoring that is done at every level. And indeed, of course, the other last one is basically the delay in submission. That's also a challenge that has been faced as this has been going on. Lessons to overcome the challenges. First has been a letter written by the Permanent Secretary to guide. So every time we are beginning the year, or we're ending the year, there's a good letter written by the Permanent Secretary to guide on the implementation plan for the baseline, midline, and endline. And this cascades downwards, meaning that it comes to the provincial office, and the provincial office also writes it to the districts, and the districts writes to the zone as well as the schools. So there's a letter that is trying to help us every time this assessment is to start. There's that formulation of the letter by the Permanent Secretary and guides us on how our plan must be. And also our lesson learned is that continued assessment for learners who were absent during the assessment week. We also learned through the interaction that we don't end the assessment there and then, but there is need to incorporate all those learners that were absent on one point or another. And this is how we bring them in, and closing the assessment at that point in time, just within the first few days, may not be very helpful. There's an allowance of an assessment period where we can also allow the learners to go on, especially those that were absent. And lessons learned also, the last one is the portal inbuilt checks ensures that the data entered is consistent and accurate. So you are able to check through the data by our portal, viewing the portal, that some of the figures that are entered there are consistent in the assessment procedure. So this is how Ministry of Education in Zambia has been handling our assessment process, and I think it's very important and very helpful by incorporating all officers at different levels so that they are able to view and ascertain what is happening. Thank you very much. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kalito. I mean, that was really a deep dive into Zambia's catch-up assessment and data processes, and I'm hoping that our audience will have many questions for you. We are going to come back to Mr. Kalito for questions. So if you do have questions, please do add them to the Q&A box, and we will come back after our next presentation or next discussion to take up some of those questions with Mr. Kalito. So thank you so much again, Mr. Kalito, for making time and for sharing those experiences for us. I think it's been really exciting to be part of the journey in Zambia and to see how much progress has been made. I'm now going to move to the next and the last section of our webinar today, which is really hearing from teachers themselves. And we're very excited to have with us Shamsuddin Ibrahim, who is presently a head teacher at the LGA Central Primary School, Kurmin Kogi, in Ikara local government area in Nigeria. So welcome, Shamsuddin. And along with Shamsuddin, we also have Salome Anang Joseph, who is a teaching at the right level master trainer and a head teacher at the UBE Gidado Nomadic School in Nigeria. And Salome has been part of course, the TaRL journey, but also more broadly teaching and learning in Nigeria. So very excited to have both of you with us here today. Thank you so much for making time to join us. I'm also going to invite Chavi Jain, who is the Deputy Director of Measurement, Learning and Evaluation at TaRL Africa, and has been working very closely with all of the countries, but especially in the early days with Nigeria. So very excited, Chavi, for you to be here to be having this conversation. So I'm going to hand over to you now. Just a reminder to please unmute the phone that you're using as your mic. And over to you, Chavi, Salome, and Shamsuddin.
Thanks, Devyani. So firstly, like whenever I go to a Nigerian school, I'm always like invited by saying you're welcome. So Salome and Shamsuddin, you're welcome. I'm super excited to be speaking with you today. So my first question is, like, you've been implementing teaching at the right level for about 2 years now. Tell us about your experience conducting TaRL assessments and how are they different from what you were doing before? So Shamsu, you want to go first?
Okay. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon. Some of the differences we are having conducting TaRL assessment with the conventional classes that we have is that in our conventional classes, we normally assess children based on general assessment, that is like examination and test. But when it comes to TaRL, we assess children or learners based on one-on-one assessment with the teacher. So it is difficult under the conventional system of teaching to have the clear picture of our goals achieved from the learners. But in TaRL assessment, because we have conducted it based on one-on-one with the learners, we have the clear picture of the goals achieved, because the children or the learners have a time to read the content given to them or the numeracy to identify the numbers, digits, or to solve the operation given to them. So in the conventional class, there is possibility that learners can copy from one another, which make it difficult to have the clear picture of the goal achieved. While in the TaRL assessment, we have the clear picture of the goal achieved because we have conducted it one-on-one. A child can have a good result under a conventional class because he has copied from someone, while here in the TaRL, we have the clear picture. He has to solve it alone with the teacher, and we caught the highest level of his competency during the assessment.
Thank you. Salome, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Chavi. In addition to what Shams had already said, mental assessment is actually simple, easy, and comprehensive. Comprehensive in the sense that every learner will be included in the assessment class and also the assessment TaRL assessment, meaning that in the TaRL assessment, it's either a child is in the beginner, letter, story, there must be a level for the child. Unlike the normal conventional school, the conventional school will just have one test, exam, or something to try the child's knowledge, not knowing where the actual level learning of that child is. We have these exams that we set to try the child to give. It's broader in the conventional school, unlike the one of the TaRL. TaRL is just very simple and straight to the point. Thank you.
Great. So Shamsuddin, I think, even in Anjali's presentation, we saw, and it's been my experience as well, traveling in northern Nigeria, that there are many children in grades 4, 5, 6 who are still struggling with foundational literacy and numeracy, right? Basic reading, basic math. But these are children who are taught much higher level concepts as per the curriculum, right? So now my question is, before TaRL, did you anyway have a sense that there are children who are lacking these foundational skills? Like, how did you navigate that in your classroom? If there are children who are struggling with basic reading and math, and they're expected to do or learn curriculum, like, how did you navigate that situation in your classroom? And you mentioned that some children are copying in school examinations. Is it what is happening? Or like, how did these children perform in the regular school exams?
Okay. The performance in the regular school exams that's why it is very difficult to say this is the exact achievement because of the condition of the exams. They do it in a combined class together. Everyone is there writing the exams, so there is possibility, and the class is so populous. There is too much number of children in the class, so it makes it easy for the children to share the answers among them. But when it comes to the assessment, it's different. And we navigate their performance. The way that we understand these children that are having difficulties in reading or in numeracy is based on through the performance too. Through what we have marked during the exams, and then we come to understand that this few, as I've said, it will not give us the clear picture under that conventional. We don't have the clear picture of their performance. So it is only through this TaRL, because we do it one-on-one, now it gives us the clear picture of their performance. In conventional classes, we don't consider the individual differences of the learners. We give them the same activities. So whether they understand or they don't understand, we give them the same activity. Unlike the TaRL that we conduct the assessment, we know their weak areas, where they need support, and then we teach them based on what they need. Like, for example, in the conventional class, we are wishing to cover our curriculum. If they are in grade 4, everyone will attend the same topic. We treat the same thing with them, whether they are in that phase or not. But in TaRL, if you are under 1 digit, we give you the activities of 1 digit. We are now expecting you to know the digits, move to 2 digits, and then move to operation. While it is different in the conventional class, whether you know it or you don't know it, we give you, and whether you pass it or you don't pass it, you move to the next grade. But in TaRL, after identifying the weakness of the learner, we give them activity. they move based on their pace. If he is in 2 digits, we give him the activity that will help him to move to the operation level. But in conventional class, for example, now, someone that is under beginner or 1 digit, we give them activity together with those under operation level, for example. But while in TaRL, those are in operation, they work operation, 2 digits will work under 2 digits, while in 1 digit and beginners work on the same activities. So these are some of the differences that we have between the convention and this TaRL.
Let me ask a follow-up question to this. So like maybe when the first time you did the TaRL assessments, did the results come as a shock to you that children in grades 4, 5, and 6 are struggling with these basics, or you already knew that?
No, we don't have the actual situation, but with TaRL help us and give us the real picture of our educational system, because we conduct the assessment. Maybe out of 100 children in conventional class, these 100 children, we don't have the clear picture of how many of them are actually can solve operation. How many can identify 2 digits? How many can identify 1 digit? But only through this TaRL assessment, now we have the clear picture of, in this grade, how many people are under this level, how many are learners under the other level.
What about you, Salome? When you did the TaRL assessments for the first time for your class, was it a shock or you knew that already?
Okay, it was a shock because we assumed that all these children in primary 4, 5, 6, they're supposed to be able to identify 1 digit or be able to identify the letters. When you do the assessment, you find out that a pupil in primary 6 doesn't know or cannot identify a letter. So it came as a shock to us. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Salome, my next question is again to you. I've often heard from teachers that, conducting the assessments with children is one thing, but making sense of the data and using it for classroom teaching is the more difficult part. So tell me, how is it for you? Like how easy or difficult it is for you to, consolidate the information from assessments and making use of that data?
Okay, it's actually an easy one from the side of TaRL. The first thing I do is to interpret the data. When I collect the assessment, so I interpret it and know how many learners I have in each competency level. So this will help me to make or create smaller groups. When I create the smaller groups, then I get my session plan. This session plan, okay, as the going says, it says one who fails to plan plans to fail. So my session planner will help me to know the particular activity to give to a particular competency level. For example, you cannot carry a story activity and give to a child who is a beginner and letter. That would be so tedious or stressful for that child. And you cannot carry a beginner and letter activity and give to one who is in story. It should just look like a child came to school to play or something. So with this session plan, it will help you to know the actual activity to give to a child or a learner. Then in addition, this session, assessment data helps you to track the progress of a child over time. A child will be in beginner and letter, and your overall goal is that you want this child to leave that level, to attain maybe story. So you follow it from the assessment data. When you go, you see that this particular child is in beginner, you track the progress over time and see if there's actually a progress. Thank you.
Any challenges you have been facing with these assessments? Both of you. Like maybe Salome, you can go first and then Shamsu, you.
Okay. Thank you again. The challenges with this assessment, one that I've actually noticed is the high PTR. PTR meaning pupil teacher ratio. You imagine one teacher handling 200 learners. That's actually tedious. Before the teacher will be able to assess 200 learners within a very short time frame, maybe they'll give you 2 weeks for assessment. That will actually be stressful on the part of the teacher. So I think the PTR is actually overwhelming. Thank you.
Something you want to add to that?
Okay. Yeah. In addition to what Salome has already said, we have other challenges like learners' inconsistency. Some children cannot be in the school all the time. For example, maybe we have conducted the assessment. For example, before the rainy season, we will see we assess so many learners. But when it comes to rainy season, during the class activities, the children will be in the farm. Maybe now you conduct midline assessment. Most of the children will not be in the school. So it will affect the progress of the learners. They can only come back during the L-line assessment. So now it affects the data. These children cannot be progressed. So this is one of the challenges. Then another challenge is that inadequate assessment materials. During the assessment, sometimes we go run out of the materials because there are so many schools. To print the papers, go and share into like 200 schools, it is very difficult sometimes. So it delayed the assessment for some schools. These are some of the challenges that we face sometimes.
Thank you. One last question. So there are many policymakers, NGO teams, donors, and other education stakeholders who are listening to this webinar today. So if you have like one advice to give to them on like how one should be designing assessments for teachers like yourselves, what would it be? One advice.
Okay. The advice I can give here is to train the teachers, improve the teachers' ability for assessment. That is assessment literacy of the teachers. They need to have a good knowledge about the assessment, most especially in the areas of what to assess, who to assess, and when to assess. For example, now, what to assess? Which area are we going to assess? Are we going to assess all the areas that we are teaching, or we are going to assess specific areas? For example, is it language, literacy, and numeracy? For example, now if you consider the literacy can represent all the subjects that we are teaching because it deals with the language. So that one can cover it, and then the other part is numeracy. So the teachers should know that this is what we are going, these are the areas that we are targeting. Then the second one is who. Who are we going to assess? Are we going to assess all the grades? Are we going to assess grade 1 to 3, 4 to 6, or grade 7 to 9? So the teachers must have that knowledge of the area of the assessment. And then the last one is when. When are we going to do the assessment? Are we going to do it like the baseline, midline, the L line? When are we going to start the baseline? When are we going to, how many times, then after how many months are we going to do the midline? Then after the midline, how many months before conducting the L line assessment? So that is one of the things that teachers should know before going into the assessment.
Okay. I think we should include more competency levels. For example, a child who cannot do the subtraction, but can actually do the addition, maybe addition 1 + 1, 2 plus simple numeracy, simple addition, does not have its actual competency level there. Because if you cannot do subtraction, you will be brought back to 2 digits. And I think that's not actually okay. There should be an in-between competency level for addition or simple numeracy, because the child who can do 2 + 2, 3 + 3, and other addition should have his own competency level. And from the question above, I talked about the high PTR. I think we can solve that by employing the services of volunteers or employing more teachers This will help us to solve the problem of a high PTR. Thank you very much.
Please.
It's all from me. Sorry. Go ahead,
Okay.
Shams.
Okay, thank you. Please, I think in addition, we have another challenge, like the issue of this data. During the assessment, we discussed about the inadequate assessment materials. So we use paper during the assessment and then compilation of data. I think if possible to solve this problem, to provide funds, Android funds for the teachers for easy data flow. It will help to send the data easily instead of waiting for the papers to distribute and then send the papers back again to compile the data. So I think it will be more easier for the teachers and it will be more comfortable for them to compile the data and share it direct instead of waiting for the papers to flow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. I hope people who design assessments, who are thinking about assessments, have taken notes, because you are the ones who make learning magic happen in the classroom. So, and assessments are first and foremost for the teachers. So it's absolutely essential that your needs and your preferences are kept in mind as we think about assessments. So thank you so much once again. Over to you, Devyani.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Salome, Shamsuddin, Chavi. Very interesting conversation. And I know we could have gone on even longer, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I want to take the opportunity to just call all the speakers back on the screen to thank them. I know Mr. Kalito has very kindly been answering some questions in the chat. And I think Salome and Shamsuddin, you can do that as well if there are more questions. But can I just request all our speakers to turn on their cameras so that I have the opportunity to thank all of you once, Cleo, Mr. Kalito, Salome, Shamsuddin, Anjali, Chavi. Thank you so much for taking out time to put together this very interesting session today. I know there are still more questions in the chat. For anybody who would like to share their contact details with the audience or with certain people who have asked questions, you can please do that directly by sending them a message to everyone or a private message on the chat, and we can continue to answer the questions. There are still many open questions in the chat, but they're quite detailed and quite specific. So I think it'll be better to have them answered in the chat. But thank you once again. I hope you all enjoyed being with us as much as we enjoyed hearing from you. Before you leave us today, to the audience, please do take a moment to answer a few questions that will help us organize future webinars. So my colleague Arlene will just share the details for the Menti link in the chat. Otherwise, you can just go to menti.com and add the code 17503212. Just to make sure we're all on the Menti, please help us answer this very simple question. Where did you join us from today? So that's menti.com. 17503212, or you can click the link that we should be receiving in the chat shortly. So menti.com, put the code 17503212 and tell us, where did you join us from today? That's menti.com and 17503212. I'm doing it alongside as well. So where did you join us from today? Netherlands, India, London, that's me. Can we hear from others as well? Uganda, great. Kaduna, Nigeria, Cape Town, South Africa, Zambia. You can go to menti.com 17503212 and add your responses there. Or you can click the link that we've just got in the chat. Great. So lots of people from Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, Togo, Somalia. Fantastic. Nairobi, Mombasa. Very nice. You can go to menti.com 17503212. So let's move us along to the next question. Abhijan. So what is your main takeaway from today's webinar? We have been organizing these webinar series, TaRL talks. We're hoping you're enjoying them. So would some of you like to tell us what is your main takeaway from today's webinar? You can click the link in the chat or go to menti.com 17503212. Keep it simple. Very important. I like that. That's excellent. That's a takeaway. For someone, very, very nice to see that. Contextualize, that's also great. Absolutely true, very important. Collect only what you need. Excellent. I'm amazed at some of these takeaways that they're coming up. Impact of the assessments on teaching practice. Verification is important. Make it for the teachers. We have another keep it simple. Fantastic. Work with existing systems. Amazing. Assessments is a way to get learners' needs and offer help. Yep, absolutely. Different assessments and strategies to ensure to get the data you need. Yeah, we are also very excited that we will have able to have teachers on this platform. Thank you to our colleagues in Nigeria. Thank you to Aisha, especially for making this happen. Thank you very much to Salome and Shamsuddin for their time. I know the teachers are the most busy. So, to get this time from their schedule is amazing. In-depth understanding of TaRL, assessment. Assessment is key to foundation learning. Absolutely. Don't overdose with data. Absolutely. Very important takeaway. Great. Should we move to the next question? Did you think that the topics discussed in this webinar helped you address the needs of your context? Yes or no? Yes or no? Please be honest with us. It helps us organize our webinars better. So great to hear from some of you. Fantastic. We have a lot of people. Even if we get, a quarter of you to respond, that still gives us a sense. So thank you so much for those of you who are responding. This is great. Speakers, please continue to answer the questions in the Q&A box. There are still 3 questions, I think, that need to be answered. If somebody could take those. Great. Fantastic. So this is amazing. And would you like to attend more such webinars hosted by TaRL Africa? We already have a few lined up, but we're still thinking about them. And it would be great to see if we can expect to see you in the future webinars as well. Great. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. It's exactly time now for us to end. So thank you once again for joining us today. Big thank you to our speakers, to Cleo, to Mr. Kalito, to Salome, Shamsuddin, to Anjali, and to Chavi, and of course to everyone behind the scenes who made this happen. Who helped organize and coordinate everything for today. Big thank you to the team at TaRL Africa. Big thank you to the team in country. Big thank you to the teams in Nigeria, Zambia, for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you once again. And you can stay on if you're still reading through the Q&A. You're most welcome to. We'll try to get through all the questions. And remember that we'll send you a recording of the webinar, and do keep a lookout for the next webinar. We'll send you details on how to sign up for that as well. So thank you once again, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you. We'll leave the webinar on for a few minutes so that you can continue to navigate the Q&A box. Thanks, everyone.